Hello, welcome back. We are here once again at Mega Movie Z to talk once again about Eddington. Uh, I already talked about Eddington. My name is Tristan here at Mega Movie Z. You saw my spoiler-free review possibly on the channel here, but I was so compelled by how crazy this thing is that I wanted to get everybody kind of back together around the table again to talk about Eddington from various perspectives. I know we all have kind of different opinions on this, and like I said, you guys have heard me talk about this, so I'm gonna get on for myself and bring up the man himself, Michael Wolfman. You just saw this recently, Michael. You didn't talk about this one yet, so let me know briefly how you're feeling. I know you just had a pretty intense watch through of I still know what you did last summer. So if you're still feeling pretty good about yourself here, let me know how you're feeling and what you thought about this movie.
Or I'll always know what you did last summer. This time,
Oh, of course.
which was terrible. But yeah, first off, I want to say thank you, Tristan, because your review was really, really sharp, really good. Did a really good job on the early review there that we did for Eddington. Thought it was really solid, and it made me want to seek the film. I was already excited, but it made me want to seek out the film even more. So, seeing it on yesterday, Friday night, I went to the late show, and I was fully engaged from start to finish. If any of y'all know me, y'all know that Joaquin Phoenix, who stars in this film, gave a brilliant performance, that he is my favorite actor. So every single time he's on screen, I'm always going to be there to support him day one, and I will see whatever he's in, and he just nails it every single time. He does it again with this. The whole cast is great, but we're going to get into it in spoiler discussion. What this film really brings up really has stuck with me and made me think about it. And you kind of called it, Tristan. You were saying, like, when I talked to you, I was like saying, so who do you think is going to be most positive, me or Ari? And you were like saying, I think me and you were saying, I think you and I will be the most positive. And that turned out to be the case, because I really love this thing. This thing is, for me, I have to still process, and we'll talk about it tonight, because I haven't actually officially put it on my Letterboxd ranking yet, but I'm like leaning towards this being my favorite movie of the year. Like
Wow.
I really was blown away by this and what it was saying and what it had to say about this scary time we lived in. I know, like, Ari Aster doesn't consider this a horror movie, but
It works as one, though.
this is actually his like scariest film of all the films he's done, because it is just throwing you right into one of the most terrifying times that we've ever had to endure as a country.
Absolutely.
And it's really, really powerful and has a lot to say, really funny, darkly funny at times. And so, which I'm loving about Ari Aster. He's like in his I don't give a fuck stage right now. He's just making everyone laugh at this like super dark humor. And yeah, I was utterly blown away by it. So
I'm really happy you loved it. You tease our other guest here for a second though, because you mentioned that we brought Ari back on the show. We haven't had Ari on in a while, but once again, Ari's here to kind of be the slightly negative one of the three of us here. I know you liked it, Ari. We saw it together, and you had a pretty good time while we were watching it. But
I won't say I'm really negative. I really like the movie. I think it really works. I'm just not sure. I don't know that I like the third act. I'm just not sure if it completely everything works.
Yeah, the third act we'll definitely talk about, because I think that's where you really divide people. The first act, everyone kind of has a good time with it. I think we'll talk about that as we get to it. But there's that big turn, and then the second half is where I think you either are in or you're out. So yeah, it makes sense. That's kind of where it might have lost you a little.
It's I wouldn't say it lost me. I'm just not sure if it 100% works, but it does at least work to a degree. It's very. I just can't believe they did that. I just truly can't. There's certain things that I just can't believe.
Yeah, I want to start with just the base level. Where are you at overall?
Yeah, overall, I really like the film. I think Joaquin Phoenix honestly, it might be as good as he was in Bo is Afraid. I mean, I don't know. He's really good in this. He just nails this character, and I liked the accent. I liked how they didn't go too far. It's not like I know some people had issues with those accents and like stuff like Superman or stuff where they go super hard. But I think this is a good balance of you can tell it's Southern, but he didn't go too over the top. And Pedro Pascal is good too. I wouldn't say he's like amazing.
He's so hot right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's amazing. I would say they cast the role really well for what they wanted to do, and they probably cast him for that reason. Um, to be like, it's just Pedro. Like, nothing. Everything's gonna be fine. And I
And
also
then
do
he
think.
gets shot, Ari.
What was that?
And then he gets shot.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about
Spoiler
that in a
review.
bit. Yeah. Um, but and I think the whole cast is really good. Everyone fulfills their role pretty well. But this is really Joaquin Phoenix's movie, and I just think this movie is so good because he works so well under the direction of Ari Aster. It feels like Ari Aster really understands him as an actor and knows how to. I mean, this and Bo is Afraid are such two different type of characters, and I'm looking forward to what they do together next. Like, what other kind of performances can he get out of him?
Yeah, this
I
is
think,
definitely a performance where I think with a different director and a different actor, it could have been terrible. Like this is someone that you could have really, really hated the entire time, or someone that could have played so broad that he wasn't very complex. But I think Joaquin and Ari Aster both brought a lot of humanity to this guy, especially in that first act. Like he's saying stuff that I don't agree with that I think is fundamentally wrong, but he's charismatic, he's believable, he's charming. You understand why he thinks the way he thinks, and you kind of buy into this guy. And I think with a different director and a different actor, you would never have bought into this guy like morally and ethically. And
yeah,
you kind of, despite yourself, start wanting to root for this guy even after he does what he does. There's parts of the movie towards
yeah.
the end where you're like, I'm still kind of rooting for this guy, and I think his performance is a huge reason for why that works.
Well,
I think you're so.
And here's the thing too that I wanted to add to that is that a lot of other filmmakers that aren't as clever as Ari Aster would take a character like that and say, "Oh, let's make him a joke. Let's not even make him feel like a real human being.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just make him let's just insult him. Let's just make fun of him the entire movie. Let's just do this and this and let's make him be how evil he can be." But this movie, I do respect because you can disagree with those type of people, and I disagree with those type of people. I mean, we all of us on this panel disagree with those type of people, but like at the end of the day, they are still human beings, whether we like it or not, and you have to at least write them like they are human beings.
I think that's something he does well in this movie across the spectrum of the characters. All these characters feel like they're very, automatized people who are very certain of their beliefs and have, brought out past. You don't get a lot of their past, but you get just enough from the performance or just enough from the character to really read who they are. They're kind of broad, but they're broad because you're seeing them through Joaquin's perspective largely. A lot of the characters come off as just liberals screaming in the streets and stuff like that, or like crazed old women who loves conspiracy theories. But when you kind of start to get beneath those characters, they feel as complex as Joaquin's character is. We just aren't necessarily spending as much time with them. I think it does a great job of building out these characters, even in very, very small amounts of screen time, where you understand who they are and you understand people like them. And I think the comparison here is to Civil War, very much so, because they're tackling similar, I think, ideas. And Civil War creates characters like the blonde guy who's in everything, who shows up as a racist guy in a couple of scene or two in Civil War. Jesse Plemons, his character is such a broad character that you can't really see yourself in him. You can't see anybody in him. He's kind of just like the worst of the worst. And for me, everybody in this movie, I saw myself, or I saw somebody I know, or somebody of my family or my friends, and they all felt, even as broad as they were, like people that I knew and like real reactions to COVID,
Oh, yeah.
Who are your favorite characters, Michael? Any characters stood out outside of Pedro Pascal and the leads here?
So I have to say, as much as I love Joaquin Phoenix, I talked about, he's my favorite actor. I love Joe in this movie. He was great. But my favorite character has to be Michael Ward, the part that he played as Michael, which is funny. His character's name was Michael, or the actor's name was Michael. But the black cop in this movie, because I loved that this film showed all sides of the police justice system. Because while I agree, the majority of cops are, and I know we're going to lose a view for saying this, majority of the cops are pigs, awful people, stuff like that. There are that minority of cops. They exist. They're out there. That there are good cops out there, as well as the bad ones. And I felt like they were like, okay, let's have Joaquin. Let's have I forget the other actor's name, but it was like, let's have him in there as as kind of to display the kind of cops that we're familiar with during the BLM movement and everything. And let's have like Michael's character be that like rarity that you do see, every once in a while, that's there in the police station, who just wants to make peace basically with everyone and wants to make sure that everything is going to, he doesn't want to actually interfere with the BLM protesters, because he has that conflict there. And I felt that was really fascinating to see how his character is conflicting with, whether he should even stay in uniform or whether he should be marching with these people.
Yeah, very interesting character. You get the sense that he hasn't really necessarily thought super deeply about a lot of these questions necessarily before this. Like he has early in the movie, him and Joe, they confront the smallest, that's very, very first protest of the BLM protests. And he's kind of, in a way, on Joe's side. He's saying, racist cops, look, I'm black. How can we be a racist police force? A third of us are black. And over the course of the movie, he starts to think about the divisions he didn't really think about, the systemic problems he didn't really think about. And even his partner, I can't remember, I think his name is Guy, the white dude who's on the force. Yeah. He has almost the opposite reaction. He's like, oh, I didn't really think about, he calls it the race thing or whatever, like regarding him, Michael, and being a cop. And he brings up like, oh, is he more of a cop or more of something else? And just from that conversation, you get the sense that like Guy has kind of always had that in the back of his head of like, oh, this guy's not really one of us. He's kind of one of them, whatever that means in his head, of one of them. And he hasn't really thought about that. He hasn't really said it out loud. But as soon as the BLM thing happens, now he has an excuse to say that thought out loud. And I really appreciated that dynamic of that character. But yeah, what did you think, Ari, of Michael's character? Really cool character with a really wide arc across this movie, from, a trainee who's really hopeful and open-eyed and optimistic and wants to climb up the ranks of the police force, to a guy who's scarred and alone and shooting his rifle, dreaming about killing Joaquin Phoenix at the end.
Yeah, before I start, I gotta say I was pretty amused. I laughed pretty hard at the line where he says, "But I never really saw I never really saw the black thing. I never saw the race thing. I just saw Michael." And I thought that was a very interesting commentary on that's the type of thing a lot of people like to say, "Oh, I never saw that," and you're like, bullshit.
Even if he might not have told yourself that you saw it, but like the fact that he turned so quickly to like all those tropes and all those stereotypes, that it was in his head, and the way even the way he says Blacks Lives Matter, like the way blacks just flows off his tongue so smoothly, as if he probably says it all the time,
Oh, sorry. I did want to add though, one thing I love about this movie is how it explores, it explores all the themes about like what the left believe, what the right believe, and everything like that. And it looks at some of these BLM protesters, and a lot of them are white, and a lot of them are speaking for black people. And I felt like this movie was almost trying to say like, y'all don't speak for black people. Like, black people speak for black people. Like, why are y'all white people who have for years tormented black people, why are y'all even here in the protest speaking for black people? I feel like it almost was like kind of saying that in its messaging a little bit. But
absolutely, what'd you think of that part of it, Ari?
I really like that scene, because you do see a lot, and in a town like this where there might not be a lot of black people, these white people are maybe agreeing with the things a lot of black people are staying across the country, but they themselves are not black. And I thought that was an interesting commentary on obviously what happens. And really doesn't mean that they shouldn't have those views and they shouldn't have their opinions, but just think about the fact that you are speaking to a black man. But then there's also the commentary, this black man might not be aware of something that a lot of people in the black community are aware and upset about. And I really liked his character. That might have been the best. Yeah, he might have been the best part of the movie. I really enjoyed his performance and how they portrayed that character and a guy who's like, wait, but I'm black. What's going on? And then how slowly his and how slowly his character, starts to come to the realization of, oh, I should be mad about this. So maybe I am mad about this. Maybe I do want to leave. And I think before the big thing starts to happen with his character, maybe he was going to break. Maybe he was going to stop. And they have that thing with that girl, which by the way, like they were in a relationship, right?
You get the sense that they, in a similar way to Pedro's character, they had like a sort of beginning of a relationship that never really manifested into anything other than like a maybe, and I really like that dynamic though. What was the question?
Was she 18 when they were together?
It sounded like she was, or she was close to it, maybe 17, something like that.
Do you think the movie wants you to question that?
I think it wants you to see like we can turn anything into being like a crime if you wanted to turn it. Like they're nice to Michael, they're making fun of him for his, his white girl girlfriend or whatever throughout the movie. But then as soon as like they see the opportunity to use that against him, suddenly it's a bad thing, and suddenly what he's doing is wrong. But it's not wrong, when we're doing it. And I think that definitely turned Michael's character. Like you said, he was kind of teetering on the edge throughout the first half of this movie, but seeing how quickly his colleagues just immediately turn to make him, the victim and pin everything on him just because it's easy and he's there and everyone will kind of believe it. I think that just shows him so instantaneously, like, they're right. The system will just work against me. It doesn't matter if I'm a cop. It doesn't matter if I did everything right. It doesn't matter if my dad went through all the rankings and climbed up himself. In the end, they're just going to see me as some criminal, and that's all I'm going to be to them.
Especially because one of them in that very moment is a criminal, literally.
And he did the murder, and he's there just blatantly letting him take the fall for it.
And then the other one is one of those kind of just racist kind of cops that we see every day who doesn't really care about people like him. So you get those two people just kind of gaining up on him. There's no winning there at all. So
I really like the turn with his ex-girlfriend who's a blonde. I can't remember her character's name, but at the beginning of the movie, she's kind of just saying all these catchphrases she probably learned from like Twitter and YouTube about all these, buzzwords she probably found out of. And then it plays kind of funny, she's earnest, but she's just not knowledgeable about what she's talking about. And by the end of the movie, when she makes that emotional plea towards Michael, I really liked that. It didn't reach to all these factoids, didn't point to the past. It said, Michael, I know I'm a hypocrite. I know I'm, embarrassing myself out here. I know you think I'm crazy, but all I'm doing is what I can do with my power that I have, and I thought that was a really good moment for her because it turns it from being just a joke to someone who, in her way, is doing everything she thinks she can possibly do, right? And I think that's what this movie is trying to show us is people are seeing this injustice in terms of the police violence, and they're trying to react to it and trying to do something about it and trying to feel like they're part of the change, even if that ends up making it all about them. And it reminds me of like when someone's like a born again Christian and all of a sudden they feel like they have to convert everybody they know in their lives right now because their soul depends on it and my soul depends on it and I've got to do it, and I felt that feeling. I was in that boat in a way where COVID in 2020 really, really radicalized me in terms of my political views and really made me feel passionate about like talking to my family about it, talking to my friends about it, making sure everybody I know around me is politically aware. And that can be very exhausting, especially because like her, I was knowledgeable, but I wasn't, as knowledgeable as I am now. I was just trying to be, react and be part of the right side of history, so-called right side of history. So I really felt myself in that character, trying to do the right thing. But you look back and you just kind of cringe at, oh my God, I did not know what I was talking about. I was in the right headspace, but, I just didn't know what I was doing. And I was making it more about myself and making it about the issues. So yeah, I really, really liked that character, and her relationship with Michael was just such a complex and cool part of the story.
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts overall about how this movie portrayed to be around at that time and like just COVID and the pandemic and what it felt like?
And go ahead, Michael. What did that bring you back to the COVID drama, the COVID tension?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It brought me back definitely. And what I liked about this movie is it wasn't saying, "Oh, look at the right. They're the only ones doing bad here," and then saying, "Oh, look, oh, the left is completely perfect during this time and all that stuff." No, what I loved is that this movie was basically saying we all fucked up during COVID. We all just didn't know how to handle the situation, and it's a very honest depiction of it because you see, there is characters like Joaquin Phoenix's character who is, anti-mask. The vaccine didn't exist at this time, but I guarantee you he probably would be anti-vax. All this type of stuff. So he has this kind of personality to him that is against what Pedro Pascal believes. But then you look at Pedro Pascal's character, and there are scenes in here where you're like, "Oh my god, this dude's a fucking hypocrite." Because
an asshole, he's just straight up an asshole. Like he's
yeah.
The rules apply to other people, but not to him. He's he's one of those liberals who's. I think it was a real quote from a real politician that he kind of summarizes here when he says the mayor's office is where I'm at or something like that. If I'm in the room, it's the mayor's office. And you saw those excuses happening all the time throughout COVID of politicians who were preaching about, oh, you got to follow the rules, you got to wear masks. And then all of a sudden they're at a huge party with all these politicians.
Yeah.
And I really like that. They could have so easily played Pedro as the good guy, totally good guy who maybe had a couple mistakes here and there, but he's pretty much a good guy. And this plays him as a real person who is hypocritical and flawed and trying to do the right thing, but also trying to do it in order to propel himself rather than to actually save lives,
Yeah, and then I think of that scene where they're at that table outside his house, and he just has his mask off or like up to his nose. There's a lot of commentary in that. A lot of times in this movie,
he has his mask fully off.
What?
Like in that scene, he has his mask fully off, where he invites the guy over and he's like talking to him at the table. There's no mask on at all, and he just like walks up to his son, and he's like has like no mask on. It's like. And his son's like 6 feet, and he like slams the car door shut, and he just is like right there close to his son. It's like, okay, you could just give your son COVID.
And it's interesting. There's a lot of characters throughout this movie who have their masks on, but not properly, like a little under their nose.
Yeah. So and then also let's not forget, like he's having, even though they have their masks on, there's that amazing scene, by the way, of that party that they're having at like his house or whatever, where it's playing the "Baby You're a Firework," best use of that song ever. But they're having a party there, and while they're all masked, yes, they are definitely not social distancing at all. And they're not following that rule at all. And, Pedro Pascal's character is all like, you have to social distance, you have to this and that. And it's like, okay, well, you're a hypocrite because you're literally standing there with all these people at this party. You're not social distancing. You're not following your own rules here. So, like, what? So why do you feel like you need to
it's like
call shots? It's like,
it's like that scene earlier in the movie that they feature in the trailer where he's like, Joaquin Phoenix is like 6 feet. And then he takes a step closer.
Yeah. It's like, okay, sure, you don't have to like his head, but like if you have COVID, you're supposed to be following these rules. You're mayor, for crying out loud. And then you're just walking right up to him.
I think maybe the most interesting part of the movie is how Pedro is this liberal, but he is the character that you dislike.
Yeah.
He's the guy that even though you don't like, you, the viewer, don't agree with Joaquin Phoenix's character's politics. You kind of want him to win because he's the one you care about and know. You don't really know Pedro, and I think the movie purposefully barely has him in it up until the big thing happens.
Yeah, I think it's notable that this movie's about how your perspective makes you think that you're right and everybody else is wrong. How effectively it was able to put us into Joaquin's perspective and make us think he was right, even though we knew he wasn't. Like, it goes completely against what you literally know to be true just to make you believe it. And I think that is absolutely what this movie is going for. And yeah, what it does with Pedro, with kind of type going against what you think is going to happen with the character. He's such a big actor. You think he's going to have all these great scenes of him and Joaquin Phoenix playing off each other. And when they play off each other, it is great. They play off each other really, really well and have a great dynamic together. But it's two scenes, and it's really only one scene, because the other scene, they don't even have any dialogue. He just slaps him a couple of times and he walks off. But it's really impressive how Pedro, as an actor, was able to make such an impression in just a handful of scenes. I think that shows how talented he is, honestly.
And technically, it's sort of three scenes if you count there's the scene in the grocery store, and then there's the scene outside.
That's true. That's two scenes.
Yeah. So
that grocery store scene is incredible.
Oh yeah, so good.
Yeah, you talk about bringing you back to the feeling of going through COVID. That grocery store scene was absolutely what it was like. Even it's the mechanical process of having to stay outside and have distance and that kind of stuff, but just the tension of walking through a store in 2020. You know, he's walking down the aisles of like a Walgreens or whatever, and it's playing a score like it's the most tense thing that's ever happened. It's playing like it's a Western standoff, and it's just him going to buy like medicine for no reason. And it really brought me back to that feeling of going out to the store and you look up and the guy in front of you is not wearing a mask, and he's acting like he's the coolest person that's ever been on the planet because he's not wearing a mask in public, and he thinks he's the most badass ever, you know, and he's really just embarrassing himself and making everybody's day a little bit worse. You know, if he's talking about open up your hearts and get along and why can't everybody just be nice to each other, but if he just wore a mask, none of this would have happened at all. So I feel like he's the one who really should be thinking about, like, sure, it might be uncomfortable for like 5 minutes, but think about your fellow citizen and wear a mask.
Well, and, he's not. I just want to say he's not like that guy who actually like can't, like, there's that guy who actually can't breathe, like he has a condition or whatever, and then Joaquin Phoenix is just being a selfish dick, and he's like, you know what, I'm not gonna wear a mask either, even though I absolutely can.
And I think that's part of something that's interesting too, is this movie doesn't present you with any easy answers to COVID. You know, it feels like we like to look back at COVID and think somebody was perfectly right, someone was perfectly wrong, but I think the reality is that COVID was such a disruptor that there was no solution, right? Like, you can shut everything down, sure, but then what are you going to do if you're a business owner and your business is how you live? You got to pay your rent, you got to feed yourself. You're just going to all of a sudden go homeless because of some disease that someone's telling you about, you know? And I really understood, especially the isolation of this town. Like, to them, what is COVID? It's something that the news talks about. Nobody they know has COVID. No one in their life has COVID. And the reality is that was the perspective, especially early on, for a lot of people. Like, COVID was just something the news talked about. No one they knew had it. No one in their life had. Nobody in their town had it. What I think is notable, though, is that it is there. COVID. Joaquin Phoenix's character has COVID through like the large majority of this movie, and he caught it from that homeless guy towards the beginning of the movie. And COVID to me in this movie is just this huge, glaring, massive, like, red herring. You know, we're all sitting here talking about COVID for the last 20 minutes, but really this movie is not about COVID. It's just about everything else that COVID brought out from beneath the surface, you know, and COVID isolates us and COVID puts us in our bubbles even firmer. But what this movie really is about is all of those other dividing issues besides COVID that have been there for long before COVID, generations ago, and are probably still going to be sticking around generations from now.
Yeah, COVID was really just kind of scratching the surface. It really was just the first act of the movie, and then once, you know, he ran for mayor, then they started going to police brutality and everything that happened there in 2020 with George Floyd, all that. But like, I do want to state real quick something that Ari said about, you know, Joaquin Phoenix's character is a dick. You get that, but also this is part of the human being nature of him, is that you do understand him and where he's coming from, in the fact that you see throughout the movie he's blowing through an inhaler. He has asthma, and for anybody who has asthma, it is hard to breathe in these masks. Even though I am pro-mask, I definitely, you know, sometimes it would be, you know, I had to get used to breathing through a mask, but I also don't have asthma. So I don't know what it's like to be someone who's asthmatic. And to have that kind of disease, that might be rough on somebody to try to breathe.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, he could have had his mother-in-law go for him.
Yeah, and in
Yeah.
the end, that's what I think it captures too. Is like in these first couple of weeks, it felt like there was no solutions to any of these problems. And if you had asthma, you felt like I guess I'm being sacrificed at the altar of capitalism because I guess I'm gonna have to stay home or put a mask on and die. And those eventually figure things out like curbside pickup and DoorDash delivery and Uber groceries and that kind of stuff. But I empathize for Joaquin because yeah, he has this disease that affects his breathing, and in those first couple of weeks, you were kind of just told to go fuck yourself if you had those kind of issues, and I can understand that being very, very frustrating for people.
Oh yeah, and I do like how this film completely shows how desolate everything was during COVID. It's very accurate how during this time of 2020, everything was desolate. There was empty streets. It was like the beginning of 28 days later, basically. It was like kind of insane to walk out there and just see how everything was. And
Yeah, Ari, I know you were working as a delivery driver, so you know the
yeah,
emptiness of driving around during COVID, empty streets, empty malls, that kind of stuff. How did you feel this portrayed visually in terms of COVID?
Well, I think the interesting part to think about is how one thing I really liked about this movie is the score. I've
Mm-hmm.
liked the scores of RES movies. I like sort of Bo's Afraid. This score is kind of similar to Bo's Afraid. It makes you feel like you're in this confined space. I think in that movie it made you feel like you were in this person's mind and their mindset. This movie it really made you feel like you were in this confined space. I think having this movie be a Western is actually a very good choice because Westerns take place in these small towns. And so you feel like you're in this enclosed small area. And yeah, I think it captured that really well, especially at the beginning when it's at nighttime and he's walking around. It really makes you feel like you're in this. And I think Western was a good choice for that reason because they're in these small confined spaces. And I did really like that. One thing I want to talk about real quick is I think this movie was very well shot. Maybe
Darius
I don't know.
Kanji is the cinematographer who did the cinematography for Seven, and Amour, Midnight in Paris. He's done,
Did he do
some.
the other Ari Aster movies?
I'm looking that up. I don't know. I think that they said, yeah, from other places I've heard, other sources, they said this is a first time collaboration, but he did the cinematography for Uncut Gems. So he's
I really liked the way that this one was shot, especially the action towards the end. The action was actually like really incredible. I mean, like I saw someone joke on Twitter like this movie has much better action than the new Mission Impossible. But I mean, are they wrong? I mean, the action was really really well shot at
Yeah,
towards
and
towards.
when like you spend that first half joking around and kind of having fun, and then when the action comes, it's like shakes you. It's like a wake up call, and all the action is so intense, like you mentioned, it's so well shot and it's so thrilling that like you can't help but be just enthralled. And yeah, once that death happens and you're thrown for the loop, it just doesn't really slow down. That last half is just unrelenting. And yeah, I was kind of disappointed about the trailers to go off for a second because I thought the trailers gave away a significant amount of that last act. I didn't watch trailers before I did the review, and when I did my review, I was kind of hesitant to talk about how violent this thing gets and how like action oriented it becomes because I felt like that was a spoiler to me. But the trailers are like, oh yeah, people start shooting each other. Get ready because this thing goes wild. And I was not ready for that turn. But yeah, I really love that turn. How the first half is funny and goofy, and then the second half is just so intense and so thrilling, and it really throws you for a loop. And I loved that loop. It felt to me like the experience almost of COVID. Of it's kind of funny, it's kind of silly. We're laughing at it. Oh, we're stuck home. Isn't that kind of goofy? And we're all kind of losing it. Isn't that silly? And then eventually it's not silly anymore, and eventually people are dying, and eventually there was an attack on the government, and eventually things seem like they're only going to get worse and worse and worse. And COVID might not have been like a little momentary thing; it might be something that we're still living through, And something Ari Aster mentioned in the Q&A is that 2020 is something that we are still experiencing. So
yeah.
I like that this feels like kind of a living breathing thing that talks about so much and then has that crazy action turn.
And also I feel like Ari Aster is kind of challenging us with this film because he makes, obviously with all of his films, other than Hereditary. I know he says Hereditary is like a comedy or some shit. Get out of here. But like all of his other movies, Midsommar has some funny moments. Beau is Afraid is definitely really funny. This movie, definitely funny. But I feel like, especially for this, I feel like he challenges us because there are times where it's like, okay, I can laugh at that. That's fine. But then there are things that he throws in there that you laugh at that, like, I look back at on the drive home from the theater. I was like, oh, why did I laugh at that? And I'm starting to think about that in my head. I'm like, I like morally shouldn't have been laughing at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's him almost challenging us because it's saying like how all of us in a way were basically bad people during this time because we just didn't know how to even handle this. And by us laughing at it, it's like it's almost like a double thing because it's like, 5 years later we can laugh about COVID, we can laugh about what happened, but it's also a real tragic thing too. So like, why are we laughing at it?
Yeah, I think too, if you look at Joe as a Trump metaphor, which I think is somewhat what he's trying to go for, his beliefs are very similar to Trump and things like that. I think you could see this as, prior to 2016, we were all kind of laughing at Trump. Even the most far leftists I know who were trying to claim they weren't doing this, they were memeing Trump and laughing at Trump and, thinking that he was funny, the stuff he was saying on the campaign trail. He was roasting Hillary, and we all kind of hated Hillary. So it was kind of fun to see him do it. And, Hillary is almost like a Pedro Pascal character in this, where like, you kind of can't help not like her, and this guy is saying mean stuff about her and it's kind of funny. So you're kind of rooting for this guy. And then all of a sudden the election happens and the guy you were writing off as a joke just kind of keeps winning. And all of a sudden it's not funny anymore. All of a sudden this guy you were laughing at is in charge of the country and he seems like he's running it into the ground, and you start to feel guilty because you wonder, like, was my laughing at him kind of propelling him in this direction and making this happen? It really kind of makes you think about your own role in this. Why are you feeling, Ari?
Yeah, you think he's funny, you think he's cool, and then he encourages an insurrection, and then it happens, and then someone dies. And I definitely think that's the point. Is you doubt him for the first half, you're like, oh, it's not that bad or whatever, and then he just shoots that guy point blank in the face, and that to me is one of the most interesting parts of the movie because he suffers consequences for killing Pedro Pascal, but literally nothing happens for killing the homeless man. Like, absolutely nothing. He dumps his body, and you think later in the movie, oh, they're going to find it, and then he's going to get in trouble. Nope. Not even mentioned. I think that's definitely a commentary on how society, we talk about how bad homelessness is, but nobody really does anything about it.
Yeah, I think it means to talk about, too, how we ignore the actual problems in favor of, like, petty interpersonal drama, and the homeless guy, I think, in a way represents COVID specifically because he's the one that brings COVID into Eddington, but I think he represents the actual problems in society, including COVID, but including homelessness, including mental illness, including general health, and things that mayors and sheriffs really should be caring about. But in the end, like, Joaquin Phoenix kills this guy, and I think that's the movie telling us that it's not really about COVID. This was never about COVID. It was always about this petty drama between these two men and feeling ownership over this woman and feeling like he was wrong because he was with my wife and those types of. It was not about any social issue. It was not about any political issue. He just didn't want to. He just didn't like this guy in the end. And I think that was really interesting. And I think killing the homeless guy so nonchalantly is the movie's way of telling us that all these issues that it's purporting to be about were not actually anything that he cared about at all. He killed this guy and he felt nothing, and he just kind of dumps him and nobody cares. But as soon as the mayor is dead, the whole town in the whole state and even, the Native Americans all are coming in to try and solve this crime. But yet the homeless guy just gets to roll down the river back out from wherever he came from,
Oh yeah, and that's what I was, and we're talking about the homeless guy's death scene, which was completely shocking and completely threw me for a loop. And it also kind of shows that, to me, it's not only allegory for what Ari said about how, homeless issues are not really looked at as much. But also, if you're someone like a sheriff, you have that complete full power, you know, and
Hmm.
it's like no one's gonna question you. No one's really gonna think about like, oh, maybe you could have done this, or I mean, this and that,
Well,
and that kind of ties into the death scene of, and I really want to discuss this because this was also a huge shock for me, was the Petra Pascal death scene where he dies and then his son dies right afterwards, and I was that definitely shocked me because like holy fucking shit, they just killed like a
A
fucking
teen.
13, 14 year old like teenager here. What the hell? I was like completely like taken aback by this, and I just I want to get you guys thoughts on
well,
basically
yeah.
on that scene and just how you think that also ties into it because he's able to cover up his death and no one's thinking about other than the Pueblo Police Department. But again, those are cops who are actually like trying to do their jobs correctly. But any cops that actually, and again, it's rare, who are actually good in trying to do their jobs correctly are always looked down upon. And they're always the ones that are like, you know, the higher powers in the justice system are basically saying like, get out of here, man. This is not your kid. They go away. And that's like basically their whole thing. And so I thought that was kind of an explore. That was kind of totally interesting to me, seeing those two different police sides going at it with
Well,
each other. What y'all
Yeah,
think?
I
go ahead,
think,
Ari.
yeah, I think the fact that he doesn't know when he does the same act, he doesn't know that he's on native land, is, I think that in itself is a commentary of white supremacism and racist white people who aren't even aware of what's happened to Native Americans and their ignorance, and that he creates this problem for himself. If he was smart, he would just not have done this, but he did not realize where he was, and that creates this whole conflict. And it's interesting because this movie is about, I mean, almost a commentary on how all these westerns, the western genre is created from genocide,
Hmm.
and this movie directly acknowledges that. Like the kids protesting, they might be wrong about some things, but they're right in that they're on stolen land. And when they mention like that to his face, he just like ignores it. He doesn't even know what to say. I think this is definitely counting on that. I mean, what do you guys think about that whole thing about the third act? Is like literally this Native American guy like investigating him and actually doing his job.
Yeah, I definitely was really. I love that choice to have the Native American be so effective because in these movies, the Native American can be the tropes are like, oh, they're just like this goofy, kind of stupid of the earth kind of guy who doesn't really know anything, and or they're like the super wise kind of like going on monologues about whatever. Those are the two kind of tropes you do with Native American characters in the westerns, and this is not a trope. This is just a guy doing his job, doing it very, very effectively, and showing how the cops in this town are just absolutely dumbasses and don't know what they're doing like at all. And I think that represents the larger issues here, similarly to how like the white people in this movie feel like they just found out about racism yesterday and they're like, oh, something has to be done about racism. Like, no, why is no one talking about racism? And then the black people who have been through this or the Mexican people who have been through this are kind of just like, I mean, yeah, people are racist. The Mexican woman who owns the restaurant in Eddington, her reaction when Joe starts talking about, oh, cops aren't racist, cops don't have power, she has this look to him like, are you kidding me, man? Like, she's been through this, she knows what it's like. And I think the Pueblo are similar to that. Like, they have seen white supremacy and white violence for hundreds of years, and to them it's not that new. It's just a day in their life, and they're ready to go to work and solve this crime. And meanwhile, Pedro Pascal is over here like shitting his pants because he doesn't know how to solve a murder before. He's never seen what he doesn't know what he's doing. And I thought that was a really fun metaphor. And
And
yeah, go ahead.
and you can tell from the Native American guy's face when you first meet him in the crime scene that he knows exactly what's going on. He's like,
Yeah, within
there's
5 seconds,
something
he already
fishy
knows
here.
what happened. Yep.
Yeah. As soon as he starts lying to him, he knows exactly what's happened. And then he sees the tires, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
there is a criticism I have seen on social media of people are talking about white directors' tendency to show violence against people of color. And understand that opinion, and I might even agree with that. But I also think Ari Aster is kind of commenting on that.
Well, it's the same thing too. I've saw complaints saying that Ari Aster shouldn't have directed this film, and the reason people said Ari Aster shouldn't have directed this film is because they were saying this film deals with like black issues and deals with Native American issues and deals with all this, and they're saying, well, if you're going to deal with the BLM stuff, you should have had a black director direct this movie. Or if you're going to deal with Native American issues, you should have had a Native American director.
Yeah, well, but then if you had a black director, then people would complain that they didn't have a Native American director.
I think what's interesting is that even though it's about all these issues, it's also, I think, very fundamentally about like the white perspective on these issues. It's not trying to be about the black perspective, the Native American perspective. And I feel like it would feel disingenuous if Ari Aster was trying to tell like a black story or a Native American story, but he's telling fundamentally, I think, like Joaquin Phoenix's story, which is a story of a white dude, you know. And I think in a way, the white dude perspective of Ari Aster kind of lends to this movie, where he doesn't seem like 100% understands the issues completely wholly, but like he's still talking about him anyway. And I feel like that lends some credibility to Joaquin's character. I do want to bring it back though to that twist for Pedro Pascal. I don't want to move past that too quickly. One of the biggest twists, I think, of this year, certainly in movies. I think we talked about a lot of the different themes of that moment, but I think one thing I want to talk about is like the social media commentary of that moment too, and how everyone loves to go on Twitter and like role play as Civil War is coming on. Like, oh, I'm going to get my gun, I'm going to kill the millionaires right now or whatever. You know, everyone thinks they're ready to do that. And I think Joaquin Phoenix's character here shows he actually does it. Like, he's someone that goes online and posts, oh, I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to shoot you. And then he actually goes and does it. You know, it's like the reality of someone shit posting on the internet versus actually like going and doing it. And I think there's a great commentary here about how social media dehumanizes people and kind of boils them down to nothing but their perspectives and their views. And he was able to look at Pedro Pascal and even his teenage son as not people, but as just like objects in my way, as, you know, users that I had to delete off of my profile. And it was a very, very cold and dehumanizing moment, especially because when they go back to Pedro or to Joaquin Phoenix's close up, he's not like cheering or smiling even. He's just there kind of coldly. He shot them, he stands up and kind of just walks off, you know, almost like it was a spur of the moment choice. He was just like, you know, I think I'm going to go finally kill this guy. And he just goes off and he does it. And he doesn't have any kind of emotional reaction. He doesn't feel any catharsis, any like release. He's still the same guy who's still lost, still alone, still fucked up, still single. His wife still hates him. Nothing changed. So what did he accomplish? You know, he got rid of the guy he hates, but his life didn't get any better. He's still facing the same problems.
His life gets worse because now he's like paralyzed. He can't, by the end of the movie, he gets freaking brain damage and he can't talk. You know?
Yeah, by the end of the movie, he's forced to see that the woman he loves is with someone else and she's pregnant with their baby, and he can't even speak. He can't even verbally react to it.
Yeah, and she has this running thing throughout the movie that you can't not even have sex. You can't even be touched by him. And then in that final shot, not only is she pregnant, but she has like full body tattoos. So her sensory issues clearly, I think, dissipated after he left.
Well, I think there is a theory to be had, though, that was it was real, but it was a mental thing, and maybe she overcame that after she left him.
I think it's certainly a reaction to trauma. I want to talk about her character for sure, because that's a character I really want to deep dive towards the end.
I think that's what we should get to next after we talk about this twist. I like the twist, and I think casting Pedro Pascal, which I've said a few times, is definitely intentional with the twist. They're like, everyone loves Pedro Pascal right now. Let's lull him into a false sense of security.
Not everybody loves him, but he's popular. Yeah.
Well, everybody who's normal loves him.
Yeah, he's got a clan of beloved people. You know, he's got a big following.
Yeah, but I also think that it was interesting to have this guy who's going to be murdered be a Hispanic man. I feel like he's almost trying to. Joe is Trump, and he fulfilled his agenda. He can say like race had nothing to do with it, but there's definitely some racism in his brain that was like, oh, I'm ridding the world of another Mexican, even though literally not Mexican, but he probably literally thinks he is. And I think there was even a line in the movie where they're like, dude, he's Hispanic, and then he's like, oh, right.
Yeah, there's that
And
line where they're like, "What is he doing for racial relations?" And then Michael says, "Well, he's Hispanic."
and the way he delivers that line, that actor was so good, man.
He was great.
He,
I don't think I've seen him
Yeah.
in anything else before this, but I can't wait to see what he does next because he's absolutely the breakout of this movie for sure.
yeah, but this twist, I think it really works. But man, I did not think they were gonna. Well, I didn't know if they were gonna kill the kid. I was like, is this kid about to literally just die right here?
Because you
And
spent so much time with him and his relationships, and
yeah,
you're getting into it, and then all of a sudden he's just gone.
yeah, and it is interesting to me how Joaquin Phoenix likes, not Joaquin Phoenix, how Ari Aster likes to create these archetypes and stereotypes, and that's like one of the most comedic parts of the movie. About this kid is just like he's on TikTok. There's the part where he sends the picture of him kissing that girl to Michael,
Hmm.
and it's very interesting to me. And the whole social media thing to me is very interesting in this movie. How they keep just scrolling. There's a few jokes where they're scrolling. There's a one where they're scrolling and they see one thing, and then they see another, and then they see the Trump thing. And I think that moment was commenting on how during COVID, just all these things happening at once.
Yeah, it felt like
And
the world was ending. It was like everything was happening all at the same time. And I think as a culture, we're trying to pretend that didn't happen. We're trying to pretend that it was not that big of a deal. We're trying to act like, oh yeah, COVID was this thing that happened where we had to stay home for a while, and then we moved on, and everything is fine now, right? We're all good. And that's what I like about the ending of this movie. If you guys are ready to move towards the ending, or do you guys have anything else to say about the
I
Pedro
have
twist?
something to say. So
Yeah.
I yeah, I thought the Pedro Pascal twist was interesting. I was not expecting that, but what I was really blown away by this movie too was how it was talking about the cycles of violence and kind of about how us as a society, the way social media, all of that kind of looks at violence. Because when you look at stuff like the Pedro Pascal scene and the and how the kid dies and all that, you are shook by it. You are like, for all of you Pedro Pascal haters who are, by the way, wrong, y'all will be happy with this movie because he dies. So there's something for everyone.
yeah, I'm worried that shot is going to be weaponized by all those homophobes.
I know, right? So, but what really stood out to me is that I think and I guess can kind of transition over to the ending because the Pedro Pascal violence scene and how you see Joaquin react to that, how he has no remorse at all for the violence that he just committed. And then there is the scene at the very end where the kid who you've been following, the white kid, I say the white kid, he had the funniest scene in the whole movie of, you're white, that whole thing that happened there where he's talking about taking back his whiteness. That kid that we're talking about is you see the hypocrisy within this kid even at one point towards the end there. And why I'm saying that is because at the very end, the whole reason that they are marching, the whole reason why they are fighting this fight, that these white people are in this BLM march for, is violence. That's what they're there for, because there's violence against black people. There's violence against people of color. So that is violence. Then he just decides to grab a pistol and just shoot somebody. Yeah. Is that person a terrorist? Is that person, someone who's trying to kill someone else? Sure. But you were just there protesting against violence. And now you are here grabbing a pistol and shooting this person a ton of times until they're dead. And then I feel like this film kind of not only explores that, but also explores the difference between there were those terrorist protesters that you see towards the end there. And then there's actual protesters who are like standing up, not trying to hurt people. They're actually trying to do, what they can to defend their rights. But then there are people who are, hurting business owners, causing violence to like burning down places that possibly could be anti-cop, and possibly these places could be, you know, for the BLM movement, but they're still burning it down. They're still really like messing with all these places, and you look at it and you're like, is all this violence necessary if it's just going to lead to more violence? And that's what I felt like the ending was kind of conveying.
EDM, I
Well,
really like your comment. We're gonna bring it up towards the end when we talk about the future of Ari Aster. But yeah, stick around because we're definitely gonna bring that comment up. Go ahead, Ari.
Well, I think that it's absolutely commenting on someone like Kyle Rittenhouse, who, I mean, maybe not directly, but the idea of that, of someone just shooting someone when they did not need to cause violence at all. But I think that character to me was really interesting because at the beginning I'm like, oh, he's obviously just doing this just to get with this girl. But then as time goes on, I was like, is he genuine? Is he? And then he was not. The whole thing was just, or was he genuine? But then in that moment, decided he wasn't.
Yeah, I think he swings like any person, a normal person kind of does, And I think I honestly read him as sort of like a Bernie bro type of guy, where it's like he's out there at the protests, and then when Bernie loses or whatever, all of a sudden he's a Trump supporter, and it's like there's not a lot of like consistency in the guy's perspective. It's just kind of like whatever benefits him the most in the moment is what he's going to decide to go with, But yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse commentary, absolutely, and talking about a crazy cameo in that montage at the end, man. Did not expect Marjorie Taylor Greene cameo.
That was insane. So that's kind of crazy that she agreed to have a cameo in this movie.
Yeah, I would love to hear how that happened. If that was a real picture, if it was a Photoshop, like what was the origin of that? Did Ari Aster call Marjorie Taylor Greene and be like, "Hey, I'm making this movie about a data center in New Mexico. I was hoping you could show up for a cameo."
The only reason she would have agreed to that was because it's showing all sides.
Yeah.
I would love to know if she knew what the process was for that. But yeah, I really like that. And I want to talk too about this Antifa invasion thing that happens in the third act too. We kind of moved past that really quickly, but that was really, really a fascinating turn. Not what I expected, that we're following this small town drama, and then after this violent attack on Pedro Pascal's character, he frames it on the BLM movement, some kind of general person among that. I don't think he had much thought in his head of who it was going to be when he did it. He was just kind of acting on instinct, and then his violence manifests this very large-scale invasion from an Antifa force. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like an Antifa army comes into this small town and starts killing everybody. I could not believe what I was seeing in that last few minutes. But yeah, to me, it feels absolutely like the manifestation of that conservative talking point that was on Fox News every hour on the hour for the entirety of that month and that year. Was they're coming to your town right now. Look at this war footage. You're sending drones, they're sending armies, they're sending, battalions with machine guns. They're coming to your town right now. Arm yourself. And that was not rational in real life. And Ari Aster decides to like completely make that real in this movie. And it was an interesting choice. It was probably the part of the movie I was the most divided on in terms of what it's trying to say, why it's in here, what it has to do with the rest of this movie. But I'll give my thoughts. But for right now, Michael, what did you think of this Antifa invasion action sequence?
So I personally thought the Antifa action sequence was, first off, is very thrilling. The actual explosion sequence that happens was mind-boggling. I noticed in your non-spoiler review, you talked about the sound design. So I tried to really look out for that when I was watching this movie, because I remember you highlighted that, and so that scene in particular, the sound design really.
Yeah, when that bomb goes off and it shakes the theater, and like there's so many loud moments like that where it totally like is like a game changer. Like when that gunshot goes off and it like shakes the theater and that explosion towards the end. What a crazy sequence of events in those last few minutes. All right, what did you think about that last battle right there?
I can't even I still can't even believe like what I watched. As soon as you see that the airplane, I'm like, is this like the authorities coming in? Like, what is this? And then you see it's Antifa. I'm like, what the ever living fuck? Like, Ari Aster is just using his weird ass, bizarre, fascinating filmmaking to comment on politics in the wildest way possible. Like, literally bringing Antifa, it makes you wonder. Like you said to me after we saw the movie, like, is this all in Joaquin Phoenix's head, and is it a comment? Is it commenting how it's not reality? There's not Antifa coming near small town in the middle of nowhere. Nobody cares, and he's imagining that it is, and it makes you question like what was real, like when did he, like what happened? But I like it. I do. I even if I don't love it, I like the ambition of just to do something so wild and just confront these things like just head on. And he might not have come off as someone who's completely knowledgeable on everything politically, but he's commenting on what he does know, and I think it really does work. I'm not 100% sure if I love the very ending completely. It's
Oh yeah, we'll
interesting.
bring that up for sure. That'll be a whole other topic after this
I
game, for sure.
absolutely love it, and I'll talk about why whenever we talk about that.
I even if I don't love it, I really adore the ambition of just doing stuff like this. Like how do you like what studio executive even at A24 like says you can do this? All right, like that's fine. Just go ahead.
Yeah, talk about how like movies are trying to hide away from these issues and not talk about COVID, not talk about Antifa, especially like in Trump 2.0 era. It feels like Hollywood is trying to swing away from being about like anything. It's trying to go back to pure
Nobody will
entertainment,
fucking
pure
comment
fluff.
on something like Antifa. Like that is insane.
And he's doing it so directly without putting anything in between you and the commentary. It's very abrasive, and I really, really love that about it.
Yeah, that's what I love that about Ari Aster is that he's taking a risk with this one, and I think he knew it because, like Ari said, no one else is gonna talk about Antifa and talk about BLM in this way, and also talk about all these issues, which I feel makes it honestly kind of the definitive film of like political film. I should say, of this decade. I feel like out of all the political films that we've had, like this one, I feel like is the definitive of this decade that really encapsulates everything we've had to go through.
The moment for me where I was like, what? Was when Michael's teeth looked weird and then he literally blew up and then he survived that and had a bunch of... What?
What happened to his teeth? I was wondering about
that.
I
was kind of... I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what was going on there. But then he blows up, but then he survives and that's what makes me wonder, like, is the end completely real? Because like he got how could he survive that? But
yeah, I would definitely like to talk about my thoughts on that, but
yeah,
I have some insight for sure, but I want to get you guys' thoughts up before I say anything.
Yeah, but I think having that moment was very wild. I think though that having the black man survive, but then the idea of them using the black cop as that is interesting commentary to me because they're almost like they're like hypocrites. You're trying to fight racism, but then you literally kidnapped a black man. Yeah, you got him out of jail, but you kidnapped him, and then you're gonna potentially kill him. I thought that was some interesting commentary there. And yeah, we'll get to the. I'll save talking about him being scarred until we talk about the very end.
Yeah, I want to talk about the violence kind of begetting of violence here. You talked about the cycle of violence, and I think that's absolutely something that Pedro Pascal's violence against, Joaquin's violence against Pedro's character, I think manifests in a way the Antifa violence. And I think this is trying to show us in that last act from both Joe's perspective and the Antifa invasion perspective, like the ultimate culmination of these divided times and these divided issues. Like, this is where we will be if we don't change the direction we're going in. People are just going to be shooting each other. People are just going to be invading other states, and this, if they're going to show us the maximalist version of like a rugged individualist in Joaquin Phoenix's character, where he's just going to go kill the invading minority he hates, then I think it also makes sense that they show like the escalated version of the left, where they actually are like a military force invading your home. And you talk about how the violence just kind of grows and grows and grows and grows. And I think that last action sequence is supposed to show us like the grand explosion of violence and what our inevitable result is if we just stay in these bubbles forever. The inevitable result of bubbles clashing that aren't going to break is violence. Somebody's going to break. Someone's going to break at some point, and that's what's going to happen if we don't change our direction. And I also think it has to do with, especially getting into the actual ending here, like how the system ultimately does reinforce itself all the time. Like in the end, everything kind of worked out for the villain. Like, sure, he's had a physical injury. His life is not as easy as it was in some ways, but he's in charge of a town. He has a giant mansion. He's basically living the life. He's still alive.
He's still alive, whereas a lot of black people, who were hurt by cops, killed by cops, are not alive. Like, he might be in a horrible position, but he's alive.
And I was talking more about Joe's character because he's paralyzed, but he seems like he kind of wins. And not only does he win, but he gets to kind of like essentially celebrate on the corpse of his victims. He's living in the house of the man that he murdered, in his job, with his power. And I think there's definitely a Trump commentary in there where Trump gets to attack the government, gets to lead an invasion on the Capitol, and then he gets to just go sit in the White House afterwards. He gets to attack the government and then just be the government. And I thought that was a really interesting element of that last ending there for sure. And I think talking about Michael's ending, I think it's very notable that one of the last things we see him doing is shooting his rifle again, aiming for that target, getting that perfect headshot, getting better and better and better. And then we see him zooming in on Joaquin Phoenix with that camera. And I think you talk about the cycle of violence. I think they're showing us here that Michael is going to kill Joaquin Phoenix's character, if not right now, like within days. And that is almost like a Sopranos style ending. Spoiler alert for the Sopranos, I guess. Oops. But like, it seems like they're leaving you hanging on like this guy is going to kill Joaquin Phoenix's character and just perpetuate the cycle of violence again and again and again and again. And we talked about how early in the movie, Michael seems like he's on the line. He's almost ready to turn. He's ready to turn away from this cycle and move towards some sort of change. But everything that happens to him, whether it's from the protesters or it's from Joe or it's from the other police officers or it's from the news or it's from Antifa, all of those forces have turned him back to violence. They've essentially have created like the monstrous, violent black man that people are so afraid of, and I think that was a very, very interesting final moment to end that character on, where somebody that was so close to being freed from this cycle because of exterior forces using him for their gain, he ends up becoming the very thing that he was kind of seeking to avoid and seeking to destroy. And the very trope that he was trying to subvert by saying, I'm going to become a cop and I'm going to be, a better person, and follow my father's footsteps. And now all that is kind of out the door because he's going to kill Joaquin Phoenix and he's going to go down the same path. And we know what happens when white cops kill somebody. It's a cover up. They kind of get away with it. They kind of win. They get to have their mansion. I don't think when a black man kills the mayor, he's going to get away with that so easily, So I think we're spelled out for a very, very tragic ending for Michael's character right after these credits roll.
You did make a good point about how, yeah, it's bad that Antifa did what they did, but they never would have come if he didn't do what he did. If the racist violence, if that didn't happen, then they never would have came. And
I was so ready to use Antifa, right, to point the blame on them, and then they actually come and what he made up. Oh, Antifa's coming. They killed the mayor. He thought that was a fiction, and then it was real, and he made that happen.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify. I was talking about Joe. I maybe should have made that more clear.
Oh, yeah, I was still confused. My mistake.
Yeah, I think that you are right that this guy might be very injured, and paralyzed, but he's still alive. Whereas there's a lot of people in a lot of worse places than him that aren't.
And not only alive, but winning. You know, he's sitting there in the mansion as the mayor, you know, with the
Yeah.
mother-in-law of his dreams, catering to his every need. He doesn't have to do anything. And
I
that
mean,
seems like his dream come true.
in one way, I can see that kind of interpretation, but in one way, I can also kind of see a, you reap what you sow kind of ending to this as well for Joe.
Well, I think it's kind of both.
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, he is paralyzed. He can never speak again. He, like we talked about, he sees the love of his life that he loved and lost, now pregnant with someone else's kid. And there's all this, and then he can't even like shower by himself. He can't even use the toilet by himself. I mean, it's the worst kind of hell.
Well, it's what you get.
Yeah.
He got what he deserved. He reaped what
Get
he
what you
sowed.
fucking deserve, to quote Walking Phoenix.
Yeah.
To me, it felt almost like we see like a Nazi who's walking around at 99 with a walker, and he's clearly in pain, and his life sucks. And in a moment, you have a human empathy. You're like, it sucks that that person is in pain right now. But then you remember that person was a Nazi, and you're like, well, I don't feel that bad for him. And I think Ari Aster also mentioned this in the Q&A after. Now that we're towards the end, I want to bring in some of the stuff he mentioned, which now that we've had our thoughts, I want to give Ari Aster his thoughts. But yeah, he mentioned that for sure.
Let's talk about, before we get to those, let's talk about Emma Stone and the whole Austin Butler stuff. We haven't discussed that yet.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first, in that I think this is something I've been seeing almost all the reviews are most divided on. I think a lot of the more positive reviews are still saying, I feel like this character didn't really go anywhere, right? And I felt that, but I also really felt this character was saying a lot, especially right now when we're dealing with like the Jeffrey Epstein case on the news every day, and whether or not that's going to come out or not, it seems like it's something that's becoming a heated issue at the moment. And I think his character reflects that kind of conspiracy thinking, whether it's, we're saying so many buzzwords, a QAnon conspiracy thinking or that kind of stuff. And to me, he has that charisma. Austin Butler has that charisma where he feels like a YouTuber who sounds so intelligent and sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And he's saying all these smart things that make me feel so important, make me feel like I'm part of something, make me feel like I'm part of a movement that is going to mean something, is going to change something. In my trauma, it means something. And I think in the end, he was kind of a charlatan, but it's hard to tell because he tells this story about going to like the Bohemian Grove as a kid and having to be chased down by millionaires with guns. And then like his abuser took mercy on him and let him go. And now he's like the sole survivor of these group of kids from the Bohemian Grove who were hunted down. And Joaquin clearly does not buy that story. I don't know if we're supposed to buy that story or not. It's a very interesting story to throw in here, and to not give us a clear idea on whether or not it really happened or not is such a strange choice. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on Austin Butler's character specifically, and what you thought of his origin story, and if you thought he was like legit, genuine, or if you thought he was just kind of a full of shit guy.
My first thought in that scene was thinking about how this guy is really just fulfilling his role in the movie, and he's really good actor. He's nailing the role. I know there's some people that don't like him, don't like the Elvis voice, whatever, but to me, this guy, like, I hope this guy's a movie star because he just comes into a movie, and while I might not love it, in Dune 2, like, he is nailing that role and doing what he's supposed to do. And he's not in this movie a ton, but he really fills his role. And if Ari Aster said he's actually planning to do a sequel, a version of a sequel, and a couple characters will carry over, I think it's very clear that would make the most sense to be about the two of those two. And I'd be very interested to see, because someone said, after I saw this movie, I logged on Twitter and someone said they could make you could see an Ari Aster movie just about those two characters, especially Emma Stone. And I'm like, I would watch that. Like, that could be like a Beau is Afraid type psychological deep dive into this character. And I really liked his character, and I did question. I was like, is this completely made up? Is it real? Is it maybe halfway, like partly? Like he was abused, but he wasn't like in some like facility or something. And as soon as he's talking, I did question that. And I think the movie wants you to question, like, is this real? Or
Yeah,
is this
especially because it wants you to put you in that mindset of Emma Stone's character where she's been through abuse and she wants to find a justification for that. She wants to, because to accept that that just happened for no reason is something that might break you, you know, and you can't just accept that somebody that was supposed to love me, is supposed to care about me, abused me. And it's easier to accept that there's a conspiracy with thousands of people across the government who are all planning it, and that's why it happened to you, not just because someone's an asshole and someone's a piece of
Yeah.
shit. It's part of something. You're part of something. You're not a coincidence. No one's a coincidence.
Yeah,
And that sounds really nice, but similar to COVID, sometimes terrible things just happen for no reason and no one's to blame for it. I mean, people are to blame for it, but
Yeah.
it's not like a big systemic cult conspiracy. It's just
yeah, in
someone was
reality,
terrible.
things just happen. Like,
Mhm.
it just happened to you, and it's horrible, but there's no explanation for it. But what I do want to talk about, my question though, is someone you loved abused you, but my question is who
I
abused
wanted to
her?
talk about that. So I have, first off, before I talk about that, I wanted to go on a little rant real quick because earlier Tristan was ranting about trailers. Well, I'm about to rant about theater experiences.
Oh,
So,
no.
No
first
boy.
off, I wanted to say fuck off to the people in the back row that, not like the back row, but they were like in the, like, so my theater, there's like a lower section and there's like an upper section. And they were in the front row of the upper section, and I was in the top of the lower section. And I could audibly hear these people full on, like their conversation, what they were saying, and everything. I guess they weren't a fan of the movie or whatever. I mean, obviously. And they were deciding to talk as loud as possible during the like scene at the dinner table where Emma Stone is actually giving her monologue about abuse and about what these people went through and all this stuff. And I was like, seriously? Like during this time? Like this is the worst time to do it. Like this is one of the best
One of
scenes.
the
And
best
I'm like
scenes in the
missing it.
movie.
So I have to go and like rewatch the entire movie now just to see that scene in peace and quiet. And the girl like told him to please be quiet, and he was like, "Oh, okay, then we're gonna go yell out there or something like that." He goes, walks
Good
off or
for
something,
you.
and
Good
then
for you.
and then he's just like, "Thank you," and then walks off or whatever. And it's just like okay, what the fuck
See,
was that?
this is why I saw this at my local art house theater instead of seeing it with my A list, my shitty AMC, because it's less
I
likely
wish
to have a horrible experience there.
I wish I had, because like there is an art house theater, but it's like an hour and a half away from me.
It would have been worth the drive.
In Charlottesville, and that's where like in Charlottesville, that's where the Virginia Film Festival happens. That's where all the festival crowd goes to see these type of films. And so every time I see a film at the Violet Crown, I have to pay full price, but like I know I'm seeing it with the festival crowd. So there's people there who are like in the movie with me. And I've never had a bad experience at that theater because of that. So I just and this is the second time now at an Ari Aster movie too that third time if you count my crazy ex who hated Beau is Afraid. But then there's the first time at Hereditary, where as soon as that movie's over, like as soon as the credits roll, like, I was trying to like comprehend what I just watched, and then someone was like, "What the fuck was that?" and like shouted it as loud as possible. And I was like, "Oh my god, okay." So there's just like those type of people.
Yeah, when I saw mine at the theater, and it was a couple weeks early, and Ari Aster came out, was going to come out afterwards and give questions. And after it ended, there's like a nice plate of applause and everything. And then someone behind me says, "Do we got to pretend that shit was good now?"
Jeez. So
I was like, everybody's got their own thoughts on this,
yeah,
I guess,
I guess so. But that's why it's like nothing will ever compare to seeing a film like at a film festival, because everyone's laughing at the same time, everyone's like crying at the same time, everyone's silent at the same time. It's like there's it's just all the perfect kind of reaction. But when it comes to what we were talking about, so I wanted to actually bring this up. I wanted to rant for a little bit about my theater experience. But when it comes to Emma Stone and her stuff, you were talking about abused by who. I wanted to bring this up because I think the ending, what they were specifically showing, they were hinting that her abuser all along has been her mother. I think that it was trying to hint at that because you see, like, eventually she blocks her mom, and it's like, well, why would she block her mom? Why would all this stuff happen? And I think that there was something in her throughout all of, like, Joe's message about her being abused and raped and all this stuff, and all this stuff, that, like, maybe that it woke something up in her to actually confront her abuser and, like, block her mom and actually do all this stuff. But then at the same time, maybe, like, you're seeing the ending happen, and there's this creepy element with Joe at the end, and it's at the very, very end where the doctor, she, like, is getting basically half naked and is sleeping in the same bed with all of them. That's like borderline sexual harassment there, because this guy is just laying there in the bed and he's not even wanting to be in there, and you're basically just sexually harassing him because he's just laying there having to look at you guys just cuddle up with each other half naked. So it's just, to me, that ending spoke volumes, because to me that showed that I think the mother has been the abuser to her this whole time, personally.
Yeah, and the mother is also. She mentions that the mother is a huge hater of this mayor, and that when Joaquin Phoenix Joe decides to run for office, she says, "That stuff with Garcia, that's you and Mom's thing. That has nothing to do with me." So you get the sense that, like, Joe and the mom have had a problem with this guy for a really, really long time, and it clearly goes back to that history they have, how long ago. But you wonder how much of this stuff with Garcia was really the mother-in-law kind of getting in the head of Joe constantly, always ticking at him about how he's not a good enough man for her daughter, and not enough this and that and all these things. Every scene that she has, she's kind of like chipping at him and saying, "Oh, she went to go see someone talk she actually cares about listening to," and that kind of stuff. And you can feel that the mother-in-law is just in the head, not just manipulating her daughter, but very clearly manipulating Joe across this whole movie. And yeah, that choice to end it with the doctor crawling in bed like that one last little punchline. What a decision! Now you don't even know what you're supposed to feel. Like, am I supposed to laugh right now, or like, what am I? Do you feel bad for this guy? Is he being manipulated by this woman, or is this some weird, like, polyamorous thing also too that's possible?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's Ari Aster in a nutshell. What am I supposed to feel? Am I supposed to laugh? Am I supposed to cry? I think that's the thing with Ari Aster, is he's trying to make you question, like, how am I supposed to feel? Almost like a more horror-oriented David Lynch in that way. And, like, he wants you to question what you're supposed to, because there's parts in Beau is Afraid where, like, am I supposed to be, like, super loudly laughing, or am I supposed to be crying? And I think he
And the
wants to
last
push
shot of this
boundaries
is
with
of
that.
the last shot of this is of the data center. And what the hell? What does that have to do with anything? What was this data center?
That?
And I really want to watch it again, because when I saw the Q&A, the first question she asked him was essentially, "Ari, what was that movie about?" And his answer was, "Well, it's about a data center opening up in Eddington." And that was his whole response of what the movie was about. So now I feel like I got to rewatch it and see what he meant by that. Like,
it's about a data center.
that was the last thing I was thinking about when this movie
What is
ended.
Bro yapping about?
Yeah. I mean, hey, he's the same guy who says that Hereditary is a comedy. So,
He also said Midsommar is a comedy, and I could see it with Midsommar, a really dark, like, black comedy.
Yeah.
He mentioned during this a couple of fun little tidbits that he grew up in New Mexico, and it sounds similar to this. And during COVID, he had to go home due to a COVID scare, and that was kind of the inspiration for this movie. He was going around talking to a lot of small town sheriffs, a lot of small town people who had a lot of varying views of COVID, didn't necessarily meet the one note view you might see on the media of what people thought of COVID. So he was really moved by, like, all these various opinions he was seeing in across New Mexico. And he was specifically inspired by a judge who was feuding with the mayor, because the mayor said, "You can't bring a gun into the courthouse. You can't just open carry your gun and walk into the courthouse. That's dangerous." And then the sheriff said, "You know what? I'm running for mayor now, and my platform is you must bring a gun to the courthouse. So if you're gonna go to the courthouse, you
What?
got to have a gun. You must
Wait,
bring a gun."
this is real?
This is a real guy Ari Aster met, and he says
What
this
the
guy ran
fuck?
for mayor on this platform of you must bring a gun to the courthouse, and then he won the election. He won the election with that as his platform.
Wow.
And he said
Oh
that
my
guy was
God.
essentially, the inspiration for Joe. This guy who is so set on this one specific thing, and he's hell or high water, he's gonna get that thing. And how you can't help but be charmed by this guy who surely disagrees with you on like every political issue, but the fact that he's running on this platform of you must bring a gun to the courthouse. There's something just so endearing and so like honest about that. You really can't help but like that guy.
I love that you mentioned the movie, or I love that you just said the phrase "Hell or High Water" because this movie actually kind of reminded me of Hell or High Water a little bit in the sense of like the modern Western vibe of it, but also
Mhm.
the fact that Joaquin Phoenix is going kind of full on Jeff Bridges in Hell or High Water. Like if you look at the way he looks, it's like, oh, that is Jeff Bridges in Hell or High Water. It's like kind
Well,
of
I think that's definitely intentional, and my
yeah.
proof is Ari Aster helped program some movies, some older films to play at the Music Box when he was there, and one of them was Hell or High Water.
Oh,
That makes sense.
that does make sense. For sure.
Yeah. Now I just want to rewatch that movie, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on what is your interpretation of like the third act and that last like 20 minutes as a whole. Like, what do you think the point of all of this is?
Yeah, I want to talk about that last ending, and that was something that Ari Aster talked a little bit about, and how you're supposed to. He wanted you to feel conflicted of how you're supposed to feel about Joe by the end. Similar to what I mentioned, where you feel bad for this guy, what he's going through, and what he's experienced in terms of his disability and the struggle he has of watching his wife go for this other guy. But at the same time, you know he did something terrible, and he wanted you to see the complexity of that guy. And he was also pushed heavily on like, are these last 10 minutes that flash forward, are how real are these? And to me, when someone, if you ask a director how real are these scenes and he doesn't give you a straight answer, that in my mind says they're not real. And maybe that's me reading into this too much, but to me, if someone asks Ari Aster, am I supposed to take these things at face value? Did this really happen? And he starts getting cagey with it, saying like, well, and when he starts saying, well, then I start thinking like, okay, now I know, like you don't have to say it sometimes. So that to me was a little bit of him leaning on that. It's interesting that he didn't say it, but he kind of said it. So I'm curious to watch it again with that perspective, especially because after Joaquin gets shot, I didn't really notice this the first time, but when Joe gets shot and he's brought to the ER, the doctors are bringing him in, and if you listen to the dialogue, they say, what are you doing? There's no shot for this guy. He's not going to make it. Like, look at this guy. He's dead. He's done. And they even mentioned, like, we don't have room in the ICU. I wonder why. And they say, well, you got to make space for him anyway. So that one last little note is like, this guy, not only does he like become the victim of his own violence and get hurt because of it, but he goes and then takes a bed from a COVID patient when he's the one that brought COVID to the town, and it's a very fun little last punchline. And if that's like his death moment, when it goes to black and he dies, and that like, if that last few minutes is just not real, like what is that? Why is it not real? Like what is that telling us about the character? And why would he be dreaming about Michael being alive and hunting him down? Why is he dreaming about this data center? Like, why would, if this is not real, what is it telling us?
For like 5 minutes straight because it's literally the entire credits are just the data center, basically. Because it's
Yeah, and I would have really, because the Q&A host was not necessarily like question oriented. She did a lot of talking, not a lot of listening. I would have liked to see the audience get some questions in, because I would have liked to see him investigate that ending a little more. But really, yeah, like I said, he really leaned into the fact that it was in the head of the character. But if it is, then why? And what is that saying? What do you think, Ari?
So I just want to say, someone on Twitter said one of my favorite parts of Eddington is how the evil AI data center is named Solid Gold Magikarp.
well, I did want to say that, talking about AI, apparently that is a big thing that Ari Aster's been saying on his campaign for this film. is he's been talking about like how AI is like a major inspiration or something for this film. So
Yeah, especially in the data center, it feels almost like the data center. If it's an AI allegory, it's like we're all here fighting about COVID, fighting about all this stuff, and then meanwhile,
Yeah,
AI,
look
you're
at the
not paying
thing that's
attention to
rising.
this, and then the last shot is almost like here's the next swimming problem. We've gotten through COVID, but here's AI.
Maybe that's the
What do we
point
do
of the
now?
data center.
yeah,
That could be a good point.
I think that is the point of the data center. I think that's why he says it's about the data center or whatever it is, because he's
Yeah,
like
it's about
so
nobody's
reliant
focused on
yeah.
this, but look at this thing in the background. This is coming.
And
This
then
is
it's
what's
not in the
next.
background. It's in the background until it's not, right? And I
Yeah,
think the way that
Yeah.
this movie seems to talk about how like people attach to hot button issues for a little while, and then when it's not as passionate, they move on, right? It's easy to care about like police violence against black people when you're seeing George Floyd footage on the news every single day, but then once that fad passes, all of a sudden all of
it
these
feels like
white
nobody's
liberals
focused
don't
on it
care
anymore.
anymore. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I wonder if that last shot is like, here's the next hot button issue that we're all going to start fighting about. We've gotten through COVID. Now here's the next issue we're going to focus on. It's going to be this. And I really thought that about the last shot there, especially when you bring up the AI influence. And when they talk about towards the beginning, they ask like, what is the data center about? And she gives like the vaguest answer. She's like, oh, it's about like AI generative, some other bullshit. And it's like, that tells me nothing. It tells me like so little. It's frustrating, but I think he's very intentionally not telling us a lot,
Yeah. I think
yeah. It's kind of in a way. This movie is a horror movie about the horrors of AI.
yeah, that's why I said that's why to me, while obviously Hereditary is actually a horror movie on its actual surface, while Midsommar, I mean, it can be conceived as a black comedy, but to me, it's a horror movie on its actual surface. Beau is Afraid is a dark comedy, but you can see the horror within there, especially because of the monster that shows up, stuff like that. There. This to me is fully his scariest film, which is interesting because it's not even a horror film, and by those standards, but it is still his scariest film because of what it not only has to say about that time that we lived, but then about, well, watch out because of what's coming. We have AI taking over, and you all think this is okay. You all fiddle around with it. You all play around with it, saying, "Oh, look at this! I can make like this artistic thing here, and this is like really fun, right? I can do this and that." And oh, look at this! Oh, I can do that. But then it's like none of us understand the consequences behind it.
Someone on Twitter said something pretty fucked up but funny. They said Eddington is even funnier when you live in a city in the Southwest that is about to build a giant AI data center.
Yeah.
If you guys have any final thoughts on this, I would like to kind of move towards the closing. Unless you guys have some last things you want to bring up, anything we missed in this conversation you guys want to talk about?
I don't. I don't think so. We talk about the future of Ari Aster.
Yeah, let's talk about that right now. We've had a quote mentioned in the chat earlier about how very divisive this movie was, not only in terms of this conversation or film people, but certainly in the general audience. A pretty low cinema score. We have I think this is his comment right here. Yeah, 25 million budget, C cinema score. He's coming off of Beau is Afraid, which, as much as we loved it, was not a success on any front, whether it was reviews or box office. It was not a win for A24. And this is now Ari Aster had huge hits with Hereditary and Midsommar, which defined A24 as a studio. I think in terms of their brand image, they owe almost all of it to Ari Aster. So this is almost like a we owe you type of thing. But I start to wonder, after the underperformance of this, how many of these do they give him before they, maybe you don't say, okay, buy Ari Aster, maybe you start saying, okay, we'll give you like 10 million, and see what you can do with 5 million, go down to like a small budget of Ari Aster, something like that. I wonder what
what does like a $1 million Ari Aster movie look like?
And we mentioned like the future of this as he talked about like a soft sequel, whatever that means, maybe a spinoff about this character or that character. I could see that being sort of the deal with A24 is like, look, we give you all this money, didn't really work out, but we want you to do an Austin Butler TV show for Apple TV, and we'll give you a fraction of the budget of this movie, but like, you're our guy, Ari. Once you say yes, we gave you these two huge do whatever you want movies. Come do a TV show for us. And maybe Ari Aster doesn't necessarily want to do TV, but he says yes because if you say no, you're not going to make it. And that could be where we go. I really hope A24 doesn't get scared after this and start pulling back. You at least got to give Ari Aster a couple more chances. I would much rather see something like this and Beau is Afraid 100 times over than like a really, really safe Hereditary sequel or something like that. I like seeing Ari Aster feel like you can take risks, and A24 has that brand of we're going to let you take risks. We're going to let you make whatever you want, and you can go crazy. And I think A24, even when they lose money on movies like this, they benefit from the brand, right? They benefit from being able to sell themselves as we're the guys who let Ari Aster make Eddington. We're the guys who let Ari Aster make Beau is Afraid. Come work for us, filmmakers. And I think that's almost worth the loss on stuff like this, to sell yourselves as the filmmaker forward studio in one of the like least filmmaker forward eras of ever in Hollywood.
Well, if they can get Elden Ring or whatever that video game adaptation Alex Garland is doing, if that can make a lot of money, then maybe they'll have the money to spare to give Ari Aster some more chances. And I will say, if he ever gets to make a movie with a huge budget again, I would be interested in like a wild Hereditary sequel about the follow up of like what the demon, what they're gonna like, how they're gonna take over the world. Like that would be an interesting, like wild Ari
I
Aster.
just hope that Ari Aster is not gonna become like. I hope that eventually it's not like, hey Ari Aster, we need you to direct a DCU movie. Hey Ari Aster, we need you to direct.
Well, he was offered Morbius and declined.
Could you imagine what that would be?
I think it would have been good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad it didn't happen though, because Ari Aster does not need to waste his time making Morbius, but it would have been an interesting one.
Well, what happened was there would have been a good cut, but there would have been studio interference, and we probably would not have gotten a good version.
And when you have studios like a A24 or like a Neon, something like that, they take risks that will allow their filmmakers to take risks. And at the end of the day, this movie is still made for really only 25 million. And I know 25 million does seem like a lot for some films, but like it's really, when compared to a lot of films that come out today, it's not really that much if you think about it.
Yeah, like I said, you got to look at it as an investment in the brand more than even investment in the movie, right? Sell A24 is a cool brand, and that's what 25 million gets you.
Yeah. And just the fact that you have Pedro Pascal in this, like, I think that'll help it make at least some profit. And then the fact
it's not going to make a profit, Michael. It's going to open to under 5 million.
I said some. I didn't say a profit. I said some.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, him being the lead, he's not really. And I love him, but he's not really like a box office kind of person for sure.
Not at all.
We'll see how it all pans out. But
I will say a theory I have now off the top of my head, talking about Hereditary 2, talking about following up this movie. What if this kidnapping children cult thing that Austin Butler is uncovered is a real cult, and it is in fact the cult from Hereditary, and now we're gonna get a crossover. They're gonna go hunt down this cult, and we're gonna have it all connect.
Oh yes,
that would be insane.
I would totally be down for that. I mean, to me,
starring Kyle Gallner as the cult leader.
I would absolutely love to explore those two characters more. I think that this film and Beau is Afraid are his most personal films to date, because Midsommar is like sort of like, let me just explore relationships. Like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, you probably went through like a bad breakup at the time. I think he was going through like a bad divorce at the time he wrote that. But then Hereditary, it's interesting. But I feel like Eddington and Beau is Afraid are kind of his most personal films that he's ever made, because Beau is Afraid is, that I want to give you guys a look into my life, look into my anxiety. And then this one is a sort of like, this is what I had to deal with in a town that I basically grew up in, and this is very personal for him. And I would love to see him explore deeper into sort of the ab- the abuse of it. And I want to talk about this as someone who you mentioned this earlier about, you know, being a born again Christian and how that kind of affects everything. So I want to talk about Emma Stone's character because you see her praying a lot, you see her doing all this type of stuff, and she's part of this cult um with Austin Butler. But I liked that they didn't showcase the fact that just because she's praying, just because she's has this, you know, faith belief or whatever, that she's just automatically, you know, a crazy, you know, like some people would point out at would like any other filmmaker would absolutely do that. This one's like, hey, she's been through something.
Yeah, like I mentioned,
This
his
is
characters are
why she's
broad.
that way. This is
His
why she's
characters
that
are broad, but they're complex. You understand them, and I think the fact that they're so broad helps you place yourself in them. You know, it helps you see who they are, and even when they're big, wide swings of caricature, you still kind of see the humanity underneath of that, which I think is a really great accomplishment from him.
way. Oh yeah.
Any
Michael,
final thoughts, Ari?
I just wanted to ask real quick, Michael. You saw the Penguin. What was the better portrayal of Deirdre O'Connell playing a very controlling, manipulative mother?
I think because we spent more time with her in the Penguin, I think the Penguin, but she was still really good in this movie for sure.
She was also in Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. If you want to see her in something crazy.
And she played Foggy Nelson's mother in Daredevil.
Oh, that's right. I didn't notice that, but that's true.
Yeah. My overall thoughts is I really liked Eddington. It's probably my least favorite Ari Aster movie. It's the first one I haven't legitimately loved. But I do like it a lot, and you can almost just look at the first half of the movie on its own as just a really good social commentary on its own. And then the second half is something I like. I'm not sure if I love it, but I admire it, and it's really interesting.
What are you thinking, Michael? Any final thoughts you're feeling going into this?
So, unlike Ari, give me a second or third watch. I could like him less on that watch, or I could like him more on that watch. But give me those rewatches, and this could wind up actually being my favorite Ari Aster film, just because of just really personally what it spoke to, and just how much I feel like this is a movie made for our times. And the thing is, everybody complains about, oh, I don't want to be reminded of that time. I don't want to be reminded. Okay, you don't. I guess you don't want to be reminded about 9/11. You don't want to be reminded about, you know, all these other tragic events in history. Like, the moment we stop reminding you of something like this that's happened in our time,
Mm-hmm.
then we're just going to repeat the cycle. Okay, you don't want to be reminded of 2020. Let's not remember George Floyd dying. Let's not remember, you know, all these other things that happened. Like, okay, if that's what you want to do, then sure. You know, let's just forget any of that happened then. And so then
It's
we
a
can
horror
just
movie
repeat
about America.
that. So then we can just repeat the same thing over again. You know, it's important to be able to teach these hard things that we went through 5 years later, which is enough time, by the way, for us to reflect and take a look at ourselves and what we did and try to see, okay, I'm glad I had this lesson, and God forbid if something like this happens again, what can I learn from this? And
Yeah, I
what
want to bring in here some words from Ari Aster on that exact topic. And what he said to kind of close out his Q&A was he wanted this movie to serve as a time capsule of this moment, and not just a time capsule of where we were, but where we almost let things get to. And he says that his hope is that one day we can look back on Eddington as a warning of, oh, I'm so glad we didn't go too far down that direction. I'm so glad we course corrected and we didn't end up destroying each other. And he hopes that one day Eddington can be looked back on as like too cynical, as too much at the end. And he says that's kind of his dream. We look back at Eddington and we say it was too much. And we're so happy we got out of that moment. But he said his fear is that we're still in 2020, right? We are still living in that moment. All these problems didn't go away. Austin Butler's not even resolved. Like he's just out there still, and I think that's pretty important that so many of these problems within this movie didn't get solved. Maybe the murder didn't even get solved, and I think that's an interesting moment of like, we still have all these unresolved issues. And like he said, that he doesn't want this to serve as a crazy, look how crazy we were. He wants it to serve as a warning to remind ourselves not to do this again, not to get to this point again, and to see the humanity in somebody else, not to devolve someone down to just the core basics of, what they don't agree with me on. And I know that can be hard because we want to hate somebody and we want to see somebody on the right or somebody on the left as wholly wrong and wholly right. But I think life becomes a lot clearer, and this movie is telling us that as well, when you accept the reality of you are probably wrong about something. Like the idea that I'm going to be right about every single belief that I have on every single issue all the time about everything, it's just not possible. I'm wrong about something. I think I'm right. I don't know what I'm wrong about because I think I'm right about it, but there's definitely something I'm wrong about. And I think accepting that you're not perfect, you're just some scared little chunk of meat trying to figure out what's going on in front of you. And so is everybody else. We're all looking at the same world through different lenses. And sometimes you just got to respect the person next to you is just as clueless as you are. And we can all kind of just move forward with that. Respect the humanity of people around you, that your actions have consequences, that their actions have consequences. And together we can actually like move forward and do what we have to do. But we can only do that together, right? We can't do that battling each other over ultimately like, if you scream in someone's face, they're not going to change their beliefs. But if you sit there and you talk to them, maybe they will. And that's something I got out of this movie for sure.
For
sure. EDM comes in here and asks if Ari Aster, his Eddington is Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain. So my last note here from you guys very quickly is, we mentioned something like Hell or High Water. Are there any movies or shows you guys recommend for people who walked out of Eddington and they were like, that was crazy? What the hell was even that? What would you recommend that is kind of like the experience of Eddington? I have a couple of ideas written down if you guys want to think things through. Mother for sure. Also Unrelenting. I wrote down Southland Tales, where it's like this very loud reflection of the modern moment. And that's similarly divisive too, where people were like, what the fuck? Like, what do I get out of that? And I think it was very similar in the way that it reflects the current times so loudly and so directly. People were like, I'm not ready to think about 9/11 like that, And similarly, Nashville has a similar structure where it's like a huge star cast that's people have like, a couple of scenes, and all these characters are kind of like archetypes of the decade, interacting. That's a really similar movie in terms of its structure. Check out Nashville. Paris, Texas, I have in here too, if you want to get like a neo-Western, and similar how like it has Western style and Western score, but it's a contemporary story, and it's about how these issues within the Wild West are not gone. The toxic masculinity of the Wild West is not gone. It's just kind of like evolved into buying things, and a really interesting movie there for sure. My last recommendation is the movie I watched right after Eddington, which was Easy Rider. Not one I at all would have thought would match this moment, but it's a similar looking back at a decade that was supposed to be about change in the hippie movement, and ultimately that hippie movement manifesting itself into Nixon becoming president. And it's kind of examining the cool guy vibes of the hippie movement for the first half, and then the second half is kind of like, yeah, and then we fucked it up. So similarly to Eddington, it has a very similar kind of examination of what could have been cultural change, but ultimately just became like posing for pictures and postcards, and that was it, So those are my recommendations. Do you guys have anything you can even think of that might be Eddington-like? I'll start with you, Michael.
The only thing I can think of, because the third act is some like Quentin Tarantino stuff. So stuff like maybe like a Django Unchained, where it's dealing with the same kind of like racism issues, stuff like that. But then you're also getting, uh, you know, a big, massive, bloody shootout by the end, and it just kind of takes that kind of turn later in that act. Same with like Inglorious Bastards, where it's very political, dealing with something of like Nazi Germany. You're dealing with, you know, um, the turmoil during that time, the prejudice during that time, and then by the end of it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's fucking shoot and kill Hitler, you know? It's
Mm.
like, oh fuck, okay, well, there's one there,
I
you know. And so, like, if you want those kind of tonal shifts and kind of violence, I feel like you can get that with some of those Quentin Tarantino.
I also recommend a movie called Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. It was nominated for Best Foreign Film when it came out, and it's a thriller starring a police officer who commits a murder in the opening sequence, and then the whole movie is him desperately trying to get caught, but he just can't get caught because like the system just constantly reinforces itself. No matter what he does, they're just like, oh, a cop couldn't kill somebody, and
so
he's
like
like,
the end of American Psycho.
it's a very fun movie, and really great Western influence score from the classic Western score
Is
composer.
this the best modern Western?
It talks about Hell or High Water. I think if you're going for like a very traditional Western, that's a pretty good one. True Grit. I don't know if it's even modern at this point. That was a while ago. That was a great one, but we don't get a ton of great Westerns. I wonder, because it's not a direct Western, but it's so heavily influenced by the Western genre. It's got to be up there for me in terms of the last
It's
like
definitely
25 years of
commenting on
Westerns.
Westerns.
And it's using the aesthetic a lot. Like
Yeah.
they're doing, instead of doing a standoff in the saloon, they're doing a standoff in like the party playing firework in the background, and like when the bandit would walk into the saloon in like Westworld or whatever, and the piano would go whoop and stop playing or something, and then like the same thing happens here. It's like, but instead of a piano playing classical tunes, it's Katy Perry's firework. It's very absurd, but it is dealing with a lot of Western
which
aesthetics.
is also some recommendations too. Is like there's some contemporary Westerns I would throw in there too, like the ones that we know of, like Once Upon a Time in the West, stuff like that, of seeing like literally the first 10 minutes of that movie is pure silence and just people like staring at each other for 10 minutes straight.
Two things we didn't go into that much. One thing I forgot to mention was, what do you guys think like they're trying to say with Michael surviving, but then he has all those physical scars? And then also, what are your guys' opinion overall on the whole Native American aspect of the movie and how they're on the land? We went to it a little, but not a ton. I just wanted your overall thoughts on those things.
I think it's notable that the stolen land thing runs throughout this movie, and then when they build the data center at the end, they say, and on the shared land between Eddington and the Pueblo people. And I'm like, that's a way of saying it. But it's such a notable twist of like they've been fighting over this land, and then like this is now it's shared land. I really wonder what they were trying to do with that final line there. But yeah, like I kind of mentioned, I think the Native American perspective is like these problems have been here for not just right now, not even just this generation. They've been here for hundreds of years, and we talk about the abuse of Emma Stone's father, and there was a mention of like, was Joe's father abusive to him too? That's very possible. And cycles of violence go back generations, all the way back to before we were even here, right? And the fact that Eddington is literally built on blood, built on genocide, built on land that was not theirs, and they're trying to just pretend that it wasn't. I think it's similar to
Michael's
COVID and
gonna
all those
repeat
other
it?
things.
One to recommend as well then is also Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, because that is another one all about basically going onto land that isn't yours and taking that land and basically doing whatever kind of violent needs you need to in order to take the land and money for yourself. And it's really tragic.
Yeah, it's tragic too. Like you mentioned, I think Michael is going to perpetuate that cycle. He certainly is training, I believe, to kill Joe by the end of the movie, like I said. So really, really sad that this guy who had so much ahead of him in his life is left with all of these visible scars of what happened to him. And yet Joaquin Phoenix, he's also visibly scarred, but he's living in the high life. He's in the mansion. He's doing the best thing you can possibly get. And Michael is scarred, and through all of that, all he's managed to do is become sheriff, and all of that climbing, all of that working, all of that fighting got him to where Joe started the movie, right? And I think that's a commentary about how hard Black people have to work in America just to make it in general. Like they talk about, oh, your father was in this rank when I was starting off too, and he just casually mentions that, but it's probably not good that his father was there for years before Joaquin even got here, and yet Joaquin is in charge.
Yeah.
Well,
then they have that line where he says, "You weren't captain."
Yeah, and I think you're definitely supposed to think about the fact that Michael is in all rights like deserving to be climbing up these ranks, but he's gone through all of this trauma, all of this loss, and he's only at the spot where Joe started, even in position, but also it seems like in his tendency towards violence, he's almost like become the new Sheriff Joe in a totally different perspective. He's exactly where the character started.
A good comment from Benny Ford. They said their cell phones replaced the pistol as the common weapon.
Yeah, I think that's very, very notable. Like in the Wild West, people are running around with pistols on their belt, pulling it out whenever they can. And people point cell phones in this movie like it's a gun, like it's something deadly, and in a way it is. And then there's also that reality check of when a real gun comes out and what a real gun can actually do to somebody. This is not a camera. This is a gun. And I think that's a very notable shift in tone. All of a sudden, the cameras are gone and the guns are out.
Yeah, but and sometimes the cameras are going at the same time as the guns. Like you see the kid at the end.
Yeah.
So.
I would love to watch this from the perspective of the cell phone usage and how much they're looking at it, and like talk about warp perspective and like individual realities and bubbles. I feel like social media feed is like the ultimate definition of your bubble, right? It's feeding you exactly what capitalism like thinks you want to do to perpetuate itself. Social media gives you exactly enough to keep you watching and keep you there, and I think that's definitely part of this too.
Which is why I think I think part of what this movie is trying to say is also about like just our news media and everything, like because we're so obsessed with our phones, we're so obsessed with our devices that we just want to basically like sit in front of it and say, like, oh, look at this CNN broadcast, look at this and this, but then we don't think about, actually furthering any research and actually taking the time to educate ourselves on certain situations. We just decide to a lot of times just look at that one thing and then move on to the next story and then move on to the next without actually taking our time with it.
I really, really love this one. We talked for almost 2 hours now about this thing. Great movie, has so much going on in terms of the themes and the tonal shifts. I feel like I still have things I want to talk about here. The Western influence was such a huge part here. The cast so stacked, but I think we got to start moving things towards the end of this conversation. 2 hours in Eddington, we're nearing the runtime of the movie, if you can believe it. But Wolf,
There
you
was
got any? Go ahead.
There
Ari,
was one interesting new collaboration with Ari Aster. In addition to the composer, he did use the previous composer he's used. I can't remember his name, but he also used Daniel Pemberton, who does stuff like Into the Spider-Verse. So that big Spider-Verse delay gave him the time to work with Ari Aster.
Sounds like a good upgrade to me.
I did really like the score. It was very atmospheric. It made you feel like you were in this small town.
Yeah, it had that infusion of Western with very new sounding instrumentation, like electronic sounds and that kind of stuff. Really, really cool sounding score. Any final thoughts, Mio Wolf, as we end this?
Well, some final thoughts. I love that that EDM is doing our own advertising for us, saying thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on notifications to join us live till next time. Yes, thank you so much for doing that.
You're ahead of the schedule on that one. I've seen this before, I think.
I know. It's like, man, it's like he's watched our videos or something.
We do have a lot going on this week, though. Believe it or not, Fantastic Four is only a few days away. Stack month. If you good God. Coming up before you know it, we'll have a review on that. We're also going to be reviewing all of the previous Fantastic Four movies, including the 1990s secret masterpiece, Can't wait to talk about that one with you guys. A pretty full week. Michael just reviewed. I know what you did last summer. I'm sure we'll talk about that again in awards roundtable, right? When we talk about Best Picture nominees, right?
Oh yeah, new bet coming on.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you want to see Michael suffer through that review, check it out. He also suffered through the third film in the franchise. I Will Always Know What You Did Last Summer, the early 2000s straight to video pile of shit. If you want to see him watch a piece of shit, you can do that on the YouTube channel as well. So we reviewed Eddington. We also reviewed a really, really, really terrible horror sequel. So you get it all here on Mega Movie Z. And EDM teased us already, but I gotta remind you guys: hit like, hit subscribe, come back for more. We got so much going on. If you want to see more 2+ hours streams about anything, Fantastic Four probably our next big long stream. But until then, you guys wear your fucking masks, dumbass. You know, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah, and if y'all haven't vaxxed yourselves yet, then come on, take the vaccine.